Here we see the accomplishments of these trains. Walk us through it, Jim.
You know what, one of the things that I'm so excited about is the possibility of back-to-back IC championships for Pokémon. He most recently won the 2025 EU IC. Okay, we're moving right into the battles, guys. Championship Sunday, winners finals, Pokémon versus Ilqm. Inadequates, take it away.
That was a great lead for Pokémon there. The water type Azumarill into the ground type Diggersby answered, or sorry, pivoted into the Dusclops here, and looks like Pokémon doesn't really have a strong answer. Ilqm knows that the Mandibuzz is mostly outputting fly type damage, so it's pretty safe to bring the Dusclops at whatever moment, but Azumarill can hang in this damage quite well. It is very bulky.
With Dusclops' access to Ice Punch, both of Pokemon's remaining backed Pokemon with the Cradily and the Shadow Kanto Marowak will be threatened by super effective damage, so we may see a chip and dip strategy here, but you have to tank some of this energy from Ilqm.
I think that Ilqm is predicting that Shadow Scissor. Diggersby is one of the counts for that, as it has Fire Punch, double super effective on Scissor as coverage. However, Pokémon didn't bring it. He brought the Shadow Marowak and the Cradily in the back, so he's not even remotely weak to this Diggersby. As long as this Azumarill is not on the Lapras, but looks like we see a switch here from Pokémon, bringing in the Cradily. It has the Poison type Fast Attack Acid, which is resisted. However, this does allow Pokémon to build up energy for a future matchup.
Yeah, Martine, Cradily hangs on versus two of these Ice Punches, no problem, but all of its acids are going to be resisted. You're not in a great spot to farm down without being threatened by a third Ice Punch, which would threaten to knock out.
Is Pokémon going to put up his first Protect Shield here on the Super Effective Ice Punch? No, not yet. He's putting it all on the Marowak. And I think the reason why Pokémon switched out here is because he wants to attempt and draw out a Goliath. But look at this counting. Ilqm is switching between Ice Punch and Shadow Punch, making it extremely difficult to keep track of energy with Pokémon. He's the UIC champion for a reason. In comes the Diggersby, but Krasnod's going to be super effective here. It's going to deal a lot of damage.
Precision plays from Pokémon, and like we said, this Cradily has sweeping potential. You can see the super effective Krasnod getting launched here into the Diggersby. No shielded by Ilqm.
However, Pokémon's Pokemon is running out of health here, and Ilqm is forced to go for a Fire Punch here. Pokémon was about to reach a Grass Knot. The Cradily would win Charge Attack Priority tie, so that's why we see Ilqm throw a little bit before the Grass Knot from Pokémon. Looks like Ilqm is reaching for that switch into the Lapras, probably expecting the Marowak in the back. Remember, there are two shields on both sides. Lapras don't have a bad matchup. Pokémon predicts the switch, and there comes Ilqm with the Lapras. Now Pokémon is ahead in energy.
There are still 4 Protect Shields on the field. I think we're going to be shielding everything at this point. Pokémon has the option to go for the Bone Club or the super effective Rock Slide. Ilqm using the first Protect Shield, and it's the bait, the Bone Club.
This costs less energy than a Rock Slide. That's why this is a good bait for Pokémon, because Rock Slide takes longer to get to. In comes the first Protect Shield from Pokémon, be used on this sparkling area. This would secure a knockout.
Pokémon has his switch clock up. He could go for a catch on his Azumarill. Meanwhile, though, Ilqm is able to launch off the Sparkling Aria. This will strip away the Protect Shield from the Shadow Kanto Marowak. The HP, that's only been fast attack damage at this point. Still 1 Protect Shield remaining for Ilqm, though.
And let's see, going for another Bone Club here. I believe this is a Charge Attack Priority tie. The Marowak was a little bit slower with its Mud Slap there. This is going to knock out the Marowak, and then there's only the Azumarill remaining.
That's right, visible confusion from Pokémon, thinking wanted to get that Bone Club off. Unable to do so, however, Ilqm now in the driver's seat, just needs to get this Azumarill off the field. Still has his Protect Shield up and ready to go. He is building up a ton of energy, just needs to get this final charge attack off, and there it is.
There's still the Diggersby in the back as well for Ilqm. This sparkling area is going to take out the Azumarill. That would be the first win for Ilqm, but I think that Pokémon is going to talk a little bit to the judge, see what happened there in the match between the Marowak and the Lapras, because that Marowak was a little bit slower than it should be.
As it stands currently, game number 1 goes to Ilqm. Keep in mind, this is a best of 5 winners finals. Don't need to just win 2 battles, needs to win 3. These are going to be longer, more extended matchups. A lot more thought goes into these battles, and a lot more availability to reconsider strategies and try something new.
And we saw no Shadow Scissor here from Pokémon. Jim, Shadow Pokemon in Pokemon GO. What do they actually do? Why is it not a non-Shadow Scissor?
Yeah, so the Shadow Pokemon are actually going to be taking 20% additional damage, but by having a little bit less bulk and taking more damage, they also get a benefit as well. They deal 20% additional damage to their opposing Pokemon as well, making them very, very powerful, especially when it comes to fast attacks.
And Scissor does have one of those fast attacks that deals a lot of damage. Bullet Punch has been buffed this season, and that's why it's one of the most standout Pokemon that we have here. With that Steel and Bug typing, Scissor has only 1 weakness. That is a double weakness, actually. fire, and we hardly have seen any fire at the North America International Championship. I think the closest that we have is Diggersby, that is actually a normal and ground typing, but has access to fire punch.
That's right. There's not a lot of fire pressure in general. There's not a ton of ice pressure in general, but where we do see ice is from the Dusclops, and then Ilqm opting to run Ice Beam on his Lapras as well. Ice Beam gives you much better play into Pokemon like the Mandibuzz, as well as that Cradily.
And we also saw actually Skull Bash on Lapras, also a potential fast attack, charge attack to run on Lapras. We actually know that it's Axenas, and here we see that Marowak just being a little bit slower. I believe that it should also win this charge attack priority tie here. It can be a little bit close as both Pokemon are quite defensive. Yeah, Sparkling Area would knock out here, but P4TOM4N definitely should have gotten this Bone Club off. Perhaps with that energy lead, may have even reached a Rock Slide after those baits as well.
As a reminder for the folks at home, the concept of charge attack priority. When you are launching your charge attacks on the same turn, the Pokemon with the higher attack stat will get priority to launch their charge attacks. In a situation like this, P4TOM4N had no Protect Shield, so it was imperative for him to get that Bone Club off, potentially to strip away that final Protect Shield from Ilqm.
And let's talk about the Diggersby from Ilqm. P4TOM4N just predicted it basically. He brought both Azumo and Cradily, but no Mandibuzz. Kind of a little bit weak to that Goliath support. I think the strategy that P4TOM4N had here was what we call in the community an ABB strategy. That is where you lead strong into particular Pokemon, you try to draw out the counter, that will be the Goliath support in this case, and then your other Pokemon can potentially sweep as the Goliath support then will be out of the way.
Well, I think there was a lot of Pokemon that we didn't see in that game number one that we may have expected to see early on. You mentioned the Shadow Scizor. We did not see the Dedenne as well. We did not see the Golisopod.
The Mandibuzz.
No Mandibuzz as well. So I think a lot of these Pokemon that have been some of the favorites for these trainers as they've navigated the tournament did not show up here in the first game. But this match is still under review. We are waiting on our judges to make a determination here whether we're going to be having a rematch or if we're going to be keeping the original result of Ilqm ahead 1-0.
In Pokemon GO, it really comes down to those calls in alignment and which Pokemon you bring. Some of these matchups are really polarizing. You do not want your Dedenne, an Electric-type Pokemon, on a ground-type that is the Diggersby, for example, or a Shadow Marowak. You do not want your Mandibuzz, a Dark and Flying-type Pokemon, entirely walled by the Dedenne on that Pokemon. So both of these trainers are kind of trying to work around that with more flexible picks that can deal damage all across the board.
Well, speaking of flexible, we have some inflexible picks as well. I think one of the most inflexible picks is probably that Greninja, and when you look on paper, it has some great matchups into the Dusclops, into the Drapion, into the Diggersby. It even double resists the Psywaves coming from that Lapras, but we've seen that Lapras matchup play out. It's not that great for Greninja.
It is not that bad for the Lapras, not that great for Greninja. The thing is, you have resisted Water Shuriken as the fast attack, and then Night Slash is your neutral charge attack. But you need 3 of those, while Lapras would only need 2 Sparkling Area. And that makes Lapras such an incredible Pokemon to use that even in some of its worst matchups, it can still fight back well.
Well, that brings up one of the uncertain dynamics that exists in Pokemon GO. The idea of the Night Slash boosts.
Yeah.
We've seen that actually carry several trainers to championships in the past. Not only do we have the Night Slash potential from Greninja, but also from Shadow Scizor, and don't forget some of the debuff or buff potentials as well from the Shadow Drapion with Crunch, as well as Dedenne with its Parabolic Charge.
That is actually a 100% chance, but Diggersby has Scorching Sand, and it is considered as one of the more obnoxious charge attacks across the game, simply because it can output so many of those Scorching Sands, and then there's a 30% chance to drop the attack of the opponent. So if you can get like 4 off of those, your opponent's every time crossing their fingers hoping that there won't be an attack drop.
So to me, it looked like that we saw P4TOM4N with his Marowak queuing up the Bone Club in the middle of his fast attack. So at the end of your fast attack, that Bone Club should be launching. Meanwhile, that 1-turn fast attack for Ilqm, tick, 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 finally clicks on that Sparkling Aria. We need to determine, did that happen in the same moment? Which Pokemon is supposed to have the higher attack? Was there any sort of delay with any of the fast attacks generating energy for P4TOM4N?
I don't know how impactful it actually is. However, the Shadow Marowak should be able to get at least all of its Bone Clubs off, as it paces equally fast to a Bone Club as Lapras to a Sparkling Area, at least on the first and the third Bone Club and paces even faster to its second Bone Club. So if you get that bait on the Bone Club, perhaps you will be able to get to a Rock Slide in that scenario.
Absolutely, you're right. 12 turns for each of the first charge attacks, the Sparkling Aria and the Bone Club, but then 9 turns for the second Bone Club. When we start to see some of these pacings where it's 4 Mud Slaps, 3 Mud Slaps, 4 Mud Slaps, 3 Mud Slaps, it's imperative for trainers to keep track of which cycle that these Pokemon are on so they can make sure they properly time their charge attacks and don't get caught in a situation where, oh, I thought you were on the 4 cycle, but you only needed 3.
Yeah, we don't have the speed stat as they have in the video game, but we do have some pacing in charge attacks here. That has nothing to do with that speed stat. I think that is a little bit combined with the attack stat here in Pokemon GO for some of these Pokemon. However, pacing can be so crucial because if it takes too long to get to your charge attacks and it gets shielded, your damage is basically nullified from that. And it looks like we are getting a rematch. The score is back to 0-0.
A clean slate for both of these trainers. Maybe able to get some takeaways from that game number 1. Scout maybe for what's to come. As we saw, Patamon did like that Shadow Kanto Marowak quite a bit. I don't think we really saw it anywhere else in the tournament, but he's had great success with it throughout the entire weekend.
I'm actually surprised that he brought out the Shadow Marowak, considering Golisopod can be such a threat for especially that Cradley, which Patamon is very likely to bring as it has play into so many Pokemon of the team of Ilqm. It can defeat about everything. The worst you can probably face are the Shadow Drapion and the Dusclops, and even those are matchups where Cradley has played because of Rock Tomb.
Well, the one thing I'm worried about specifically for the Shadow Kanto Marowak as well is when it gets aligned versus some of those very bulky Pokemon like Diggersby and Dusclops. Not only does Dusclops have access to super effective damage, but in a lot of situations, since it is a Shadow Pokemon, it's just going to get outbulked. All right, a little reset here, guys. Winners Finals game number 1.
Looks like it is the same team from Patamon, but Ilqm did switch it up. This time, no Diggersby from him. There is double water in the back. Dusclops in the lead can hang quite well with the Azumarill. Should be able to win some of the scenarios where equal amounts of shields are being used. But Shadow Punch not gonna deal that much damage though.
Look at these back lines for these two trainers. Patamon has the Cradley and the Shadow Kanto Marowak. Meanwhile, Ilqm has that Golisopod able to hit super effective versus both of those backline Pokemon for Patamon.
Marowak does have access to Rock Slide, so it's not exactly helpless. The thing is, to land the Rock Slide, you need to strip away some shields here from Ilqm, and Dusclops is probably the last Pokemon to use protection. We see the switch here from Patamon, probably an attempt to again bait out this Golisopod, and let's see if Ilqm makes the read here, because if he thinks the same team, may not even bring that in. It does bring in the Golisopod. Here it comes.
Okay, Golisopod hits the field. You can see these Fury Cutters adding up quickly. Okay, Ilqm is actually able to get to his charge attack just before Patamon is able to launch his own Rock Tomb. Don't forget, Rock Tomb has a guaranteed debuff on the attack for Ilum's Golisopod. Patamon using that Protect Shield does not want to lose his Cradley just yet.
If no protection was used there, that Cradley would have done pretty much nothing. Rock Tomb is one of the best charge attacks currently, outputting decent damage plus dropping the attack, and as you can see, the Fury Cutters will do less damage. Now Ilqm will be forced to throw energy right before the next Rock Tomb, otherwise he may have to expend another shield here.
If Patamon uses the second Protect Shield here, he will get another debuff, but he says no, Golisopod, you can have this matchup. Bringing back in the Azumarill now. Azumarill will be resisting all of these fast and charge attacks, and actually has a Play Rough loaded ready to go as well.
This Play Rough will barely not be able to knock out the Golisopod, but it doesn't matter. Ilqm uses second protection. He recognizes there might be that Marowak in the back. Marowak doesn't really have a lot of good matchups to go with. Patamon has to swap out anyway. He needs to preserve the Azumarill for the Golisopod.
While Marowak has a Protect Shield, it is in a tough position. It takes super effective damage from the Sparkling Arias, super effective damage from the Ice Punch, super effective damage from the Aqua Jets as well, and a no shield on the Sparkling Aria.
That does so much damage. Marowak barely hangs on. We'll be able to get to this super effective Rock Slide. Not the most efficient charge attack, does have the same type of attack bonus, but it's going to deal a significant chunk to this Lapras.
All right, Lapras takes the super effective damage, but it's going to be able to get the full Psy Wave down. Sparkling Aria is loaded. Still a Protect Shield for Patamon, but I don't know that there's a way for him to come back here.
Patamon knows the writing is on the wall. He concedes this game as the resisted Sparkling Area goes through. He knows that there's energy on both the Dusclops and the Golisopod. The Lapras still Psy Waving through. Azumarill goes down. Ilqm takes game number 1.
Like we talked about, there is so much core break potential from that Golisopod. Able to hit super effective with its Fury Cutter and X-Scissor into that Cradily. Able to hit super effective with its Aqua Jet into the Shadow Cancel Marowak. Martine, you mentioned that P4TOM4N needed to get Protect Shields down to free up some of the super effective damage like Rock Slide into those back Pokemon. It's so hard to get Protect Shields down though when you have that lead matchup of Azumarill versus Dusclops. No one wants to use their shields.
Well, Ilqm just played that really well too, because yes, Ilqm used the Protect Shields, but he kept the Golisopod in play. That means that the Marowak had to gather more energy to do something, and because Ilqm kept the charge attack loaded on the Golisopod, Golisopod has a higher attack than the Marowak. Whenever Golisopod would enter the stage again, it would just knock out the Marowak immediately, and that is why we saw no Protect Shield being used on that Shadow Marowak from P4TOM4N.
A smart play from Ilqm as well. As you can see here, gets the first Protect Shield from P4TOM4N, actually uses a Protect Shield as well, but then knocks out the Cradily. Let's remember, there was a one-stage attack debuff at this point. Ilqm has that presence of mind to swap out and save that Golisopod for later, but it was the Lapras show here, pacing so quickly, having so much bulk, easily tanking the super effective move, and with the strength of Psywave, able to farm down the Shadow Cancel Marowak.
If you've seen P4TOM4N play at the Europe International Championship and at the Special Championship in Sevilla earlier this season, you know that he has a tendency to use those same teams, but I think that at this point you might see the pattern in Ilqm's compositions. Ilqm recognizes Dusclops is so safe to bring. It has play into one of its worst matchups, Mandibuzz. It doesn't have a lot of play into Greninja, but Greninja is almost unplayable for P4TOM4N considering the Dena and Golisopod pressure it so hard.
And with how strong Golisopod is for Ilqm, you know that it's a high likelihood that he brings it, making Greninja that much more inevitable to get that matchup in a very negative matchup for P4TOM4N. Are you surprised, Martine, that we've had 2 games from P4TOM4N and we still have not seen the Shadow Scissor?
Not seen the Shadow Scissor, but also not the Mandibuzz. 2 Pokemon that actually may have done quite well into that composition of Ilqm, but I think the reason why Ilqm keeps bringing that Dusclops as well is because it bases faster than Scissor. Scissor needs 5 seconds to get to its lowest energy cost charge attack, that is the Night Slash, a dark type charge attack. It is super effective on the Dusclops, but Dusclops needs 4.5 seconds, 9 turns to get to its first Shadow Punch, meaning that it will always be able to deal damage before Scissor will be able to do so with his charge attack.
And in those situations where you're trying to play out that 2-shield matchup versus that Dusclops, you have to give a little bit of the advantage to Dusclops, knowing that it can get to that 3rd charge attack a little bit faster. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about Mandibuzz, I know that you said it has a lot of play versus Ilqm's team. What P4TOM4N might be thinking is, all right, well, if I get a lot of my Pokemon, they have some flexibility. Mandibuzz doesn't really. It has a lot of very positive matchups and a lot of very negative matchups. Okay, if I get it aligned versus the Golisopod, I'm feeling great. I have super effective Air Slashes and Aerial Aces. If I get it aligned versus that Dedenne, though, there's no way I can outskill my opponent. There's no way out in that matchup.
That is a helpless situation, and that might be why P4TOM4N brings the Shadow Marowak instead of the Mandibuzz, but Ilqm hasn't brought the Dedenne in 2 games so far yet, so avoiding that matchup looks like Ilqm might be signing to his opponent. I'm ready. Let's see if P4TOM4N is also ready for this 2nd game here.
This is a best of 5. Keep in mind that we did have a review after our initial game 1. However, Ilqm was able to come back and win the replay of game number 1. Currently 1-0 Ilqm. We have the sighting of the Shadow Scissor.
And there it is. This is what I was talking about. The Dusclops outpaces the Scissor here, and it gives it a slight edge here. Letting it go immediately, no protection being used. As you can see, Scissor is super fragile. That is an attack that normally doesn't hit as hard. Let's see, Scissor does have super effective Night Slash. It will almost start today knockout here. Might actually almost, I think this barely has started a knockout. Ilqm doesn't use the Protect Shield.
Hangs on versus the Night Slash. Do you just throw the Ice Punch right away? The presence of mind for Ilqm, knowing there's going to be a catch, and now the super effective Ice Punch into the Cradily.
But this is actually what Ilqm wants, because he brought the Dedenne in the back. I think as Ilqm, your only fear is that there might be the Shadow Marowak in the back, but we see from P4TOM4N the Azumarill, and the Dedenne is waiting to line up with that.
This is so fortunate for Ilqm. He did not want to have the Dedenne lined up versus the Cradily, one of its hardest counters. But now, like you said, he's going to be able to get the alignment that he wants into that Azumarill. Let's not forget the energy still remaining, though, for P4TOM4N. I believe he has 4 bullet punches, 1 bullet punch away from the next Night Slash.
Correct. And after this matchup, it is likely that P4TOM4N is going to try and soak damage on that Azumarill. Not going to take any chance on another Rock Tomb here. Ilqm goes for the super effective X-Scissor, but we see P4TOM4N an attempt to take shields down. There's no switch up up yet for Ilqm, so this attack cannot be caught, and he does preserve this Golisopod.
Ilqm does not know what's in the back. He needs to keep this Golisopod healthy just in case that Shadow Kanto Marowak is hanging around in the back. He has 3 Pokemon that he would love to see, the Mandibuzz, the Azumarill, or the Greninja, and now he sees it. It's the Azumarill. You can see Ilqm feeling strong. Can you get to the Trailblaze? He has a charge attack priority.
No charge attack priority here. It looks like Ilqm knows that he would lose that, but this is going to do a lot of damage.
Trailblaze comes through from the Shadow Scizor. Is this enough to knock out? Not quite. We have a full farm down, and yes, Ilqm does have the Parabolic Charge locked and ready to go. This is going to be super effective, but Azumarill is a bulky Pokemon. It can hang on.
And speaking of bulk, this Parabolic Charge is going to enhance the defense of this, the Dennis, so the bubbles would even do less. It means that you're forced to throw energy, but it's the charge attack priority tie. Azumarill loses that. The Dennis on a roll here.
This is going to force all of the energy out from P4TOM4N. This is not enough to knock out here, but it takes the Azumarill dangerously low. We still have the Dusclops for Ilqm. We still have the Golisopod. I think that this is going to be game number 2 going to Ilqm.
Yes, another Pokemon's coming in. That is the Golisopod. That's a charge attack loaded. Doesn't need it though. King Ilqm takes game number 2.
That Golisopod has been so strong in the back for Ilqm. Multiple games now, he's been able to find that alignment versus the Cradily. And while Cradily has the ability to hit back with its Rock Tomb, the pacing for the Golisopod makes it so strong, not to mention the super effective fast attack pressure.
Look how far Ilqm has come. Undefeated since Toronto. Before that, he already was so good at consistent performances in the Championship Series in Pokemon GO. Top 4, top 5, all over the place. A king without a crown. Then he picked up the crown, put it on his head in Toronto, and now he's still undefeated since then. He is 2-0 up in this winners finals. 1 win away from reaching the grand finals here.
Ilqm was butting his head up against the wall, trying to break through, trying to get that champion title at the regional level. When he finally did, it seems like everything has unlocked. 150 IQ now for Ilqm. He has been absolutely unstoppable. And let's not forget, he's had every angle of the journey. In Toronto, he went through the loser side of the bracket to win the grand finals. In Atlanta, he went through the winner side. He just seems to continue getting better when he's already winning championships.
The versatility on some of these trainers is beyond insanity. Ilqm is a fearsome opponent. P4TOM4N, he told me he was prepared, but looks like he needs to make the strongest comeback ever. He needs the reverse sweep to win 3 battles in a row here. But can you do that against someone like Ilqm?
We are in the winners finals, so there is no bracket reset here. Again, the loser will drop down to the losers finals where they will face off versus its accent. What's interesting though for P4TOM4N, if he does lose this next game, he's going to have almost an identical team that he has to face off versus Ilqm. But we've seen P4TOM4N come back down before. Don't forget, I believe in some of his other tournaments as well in the grand finals, he's been up against the wall and he's found a way to victory.
In Sevilla, he played in the winners finals against HK Assassin. At the time, he lost 0-3, found a wall in some of the core breakers that HK Assassin had, but he kept his head up and he got back into the grand finals. 1-3-0 at the time to reset the bracket against HK Assassin, so he knows how to come back from some of these deficits or team comp disadvantages. Whether it is the Golisopod or the Araquanid, this is the time to step up here.
And you just have to take it one battle at a time. You can't just immediately win the series, but you can win one game. You can regain that momentum. You can figure out some strategies. But I don't think P4TOM4N is out here. I think that he still has plenty left in the tank. He needs to find a way, though, to avoid that Cradily versus Golisopod matchup.
He's using the Cradily every time to try and bait out the Golisopod, which is kind of a successful strategy because Ilqm does have the Golisopod every time in the back. However, the Cradily prefers to be into better matchups such as the Diggersby. I believe both trainers are ready here. We're getting into game number 3. There's the Cradily. It is lined up into the Dusclops.
Inadequates. Of course, Dusclops has access to super effective Ice Punch here, but meanwhile, P4TOM4N is able to get debuffing attacks as well. How does this matchup play out?
Look at this. Ilqm threw the Ice Punch immediately before the Rock Tomb, and this allows the Ice Punch to deal full damage. Otherwise, it would have done less damage after this Rock Tomb that has a 100% chance, a guaranteed chance, to drop the attack of the Dusclops, and you need 2 charge attacks here. This is actually not that bad of a matchup for the Cradily, even though Acid as a poison type fast attack is resisted by Ghost.
Absolutely. Here comes the next Ice Punch, though. We have seen the Rock Tomb debuff already land, so this is going to do less. I don't know if you're able to knock out with a Shadow Punch. Well, we're not going to find out because P4TOM4N makes a a quick swap. He brings in the Shadow Scissor. Again, this is debuffed Shadow Punch damage here. He lets it go.
We've seen some aggressive play from P4TOM4N all over the place. In comes that Golai support. This is where Ilqm needs it because he has the Dedenne in the back. Again, Ilqm is hoping that there is no Marowak in the back. Do we see this nice slash land? Ilqm is putting out the Protect Shield. And do we see the attack boost here? There's a 12% chance we see no attack boost there.
All right, well, P4TOM4N actually just going to be throwing both of these Night Slashes. Ilqm shakes his head here. Maybe a miscount, or maybe he wants to just let this one go. There is no boost. Uses both Protect Shields. Can he farm down in 10 turns, or will the Scissor get to the next Night Slash? Ilqm doesn't want to find out. He throws the Aqua Jet.
But not charging the bubbles, meaning that this Aqua Jet won't deal full damage even remotely. Scissor is fragile though, so it's still going to knock out. In comes the Azumarill, which is going to resist everything. Ilqm shaking his head because he knows, because his timer is not up, this Azumarill is only going to build up more energy. Is the timer up after this charge deck? Yes, it is. Do we see the switch? No, not just yet.
How much more value can you get out of this Cradily? It does not have a lot of HP. Dustclop comes back onto the field though, and is going to be throwing the Shadow Punch. When will P4TOM4N be using his Protect Shields?
I think at this point, P4TOM4N knows that there's going to be the Den in the back, but you have to expend energy here. The flaw of Azumarill, however, is that these are expensive charge attacks in cost of energy, so that means that you cannot stack 2 charge attacks. Any Pokemon that comes in now won't be hit by a charge attack directly, but P4TOM4N is very close to another one. And if you go into the Dedenne here, the clock is up for P4TOM4N to switch out into that Cradily, which can deal super effective damage with the acid. In comes the Dedenne. We see the switch from P4TOM4N. He has the Grass Knot loaded, or do we see the Rock Tomb? We see the Rock Tomb.
Grass Knot does more inadequacy.
It does do more damage, but now you debuff the attack from this Dedenne, meaning that it will be more difficult to get the Thundershock down. But the timer's up for Ilqm. In comes the Golai support.
He's going to be able to farm all the way down. He has an Aqua Jet loaded. You're now in a situation as the Azumarill where you have to start shielding any charge attack. This is resisted though. P4TOM4N says no, not yet. I need to save my Protect Shields for that Dedenne. Keep in mind though, like you said, you can't store charge attacks and you're not able to bubble down. It's resisted damage.
You have to put up the Protect Shield here because P4TOM4N is running out of health. Ilqm is looking in a tough spot, but there is play here. It relies on how P4TOM4N manages his energy. P4TOM4N needs to get to 2 charge attacks here. Going for the Player of an Ice Beam, maybe close to knocking out, even though resisted, but this definitely secures the knockout. And now P4TOM4N needs to get to another charge on the Dedenne. The Dedenne already has a parabolic charge that would buff the defense here. And going for the play round, this is going to secure the knockout. P4TOM4N is going to take 1 game back here against Ilqm.
Ilqm unable to farm down, unable to reach 2 charge attack. Shields are down. P4TOM4N is able to make the recovery, and he is going to take game number 3. Currently, 1 game for P4TOM4N, 2 games for Ilqm.
What a close match that was. Only a sliver of health left on the Azumarill there. Only a few more Fury Cutters and the Azumarill would have gone down there. So perfect health and energy management from P4TOM4N on the left. He would need 2 more wins to make that reverse sweep, but Ilqm of course in a better position as he only needs 1 win to move on to the Grand Finals.
That was the starting point for P4TOM4N. It only takes 1 game to make that recovery. Inadequacy, in your vision, what was the difference there for P4TOM4N? What was key to him making that recovery?
Well, what I find about P4TOM4N is he keeps playing very aggressive. He swaps in earlier than Ilqm does. Ilqm seems to play a little bit more defensive, going for that switch advantage. Lets P4TOM4N do the dance and show his Pokemon. And what was different there is that Shadow Scissor. This time, he benched the Shadow Marowak, and Scissor just paces much quicker. The Fear Cutter didn't deal as much damage to that Scissor, so it had time to get to those Night Slashes, put the shields away, and then a little bit of the Cradily left on the P4TOM4N's side was really helpful against the Dedenne.
What's been interesting to me in Inadequance is that early on, P4TOM4N was bringing that Shadow Kanto Marowak in the original Game 1 plus the Game 1 replay. The last 2 games, though, he's put it on the bench. Guess what Ilqm has brought? The Dedenne.
And unfortunately for P4TOM4N, he hasn't brought the Shadow Marowak, so that Dedenne has been in a pretty good spot over and over. It deals super effective damage into that Azumarill, and the more shields there are in play, the more Parabolic Charge can go for, and Parabolic Charge, 100% chance to raise your defense by 1 stage.
That's right. Well, Ilqm is now the one a bit on the back foot. While he's still only 1 game away from making it to the Grand Finals, he now just had a pretty decisive victory there by P4TOM4N. P4TOM4N getting early control and able to maintain that throughout the majority of the game. He needs to figure out now, is it still the Dedenne? Do I bring the Golisopod back in a different capacity, or do I maybe bring some of the Pokemon that we haven't seen just yet? The Lapras, keep in mind, was very strong for him in those first couple games.
I also want to give some recognition to the counting and the memory of these trainers. In Pokemon Go, one of the best ways to keep track of your opponent's energy is basically counting their energy by either their fast attacks or by the numbers, and they just seem to know exactly where their opponent was in energy. That allowed them to maximize their own efficiency in the health and the energy generation. So this is some of the best you can find in Pokemon Go PvP.
There's no room for mistakes in Adequance. You cannot make any mistakes at this level, and I don't think any of these trainers have made any mistakes. We're just seeing some trainers that are out-planning or out-maneuvering the other trainer in these situations. I cannot wait to see this game number 4 here. Again, Ilqm one battle away from making it to Grand Finals.
And P4TOM4N finally gets a lead. It's the Mandibuzz with Air Slash. In comes the Lapras, but it has double resisted Psywave. However, Ilqm has Ice Beam on his Lapras. There's not really a strong answer from P4TOM4N just yet. Perhaps looking to take a Charge Stick before switching out. Even though Ice Beam is super effective, these are two bulky Pokemon, so Mandibuzz can hang on with it quite well.
We've seen P4TOM4N want to preserve Protect Shields for the Shadow Scizor and hangs on very easily versus the same type attack bonus Ice Beam, but that does a chunk in Adequance.
And he goes into the Cradley instead. I thought that perhaps he would go into the Shadow Scizor because Bullet Punch just outputs damage so quickly. However, let's see if this is being shielded. No, that's the bait, the Sparkling Area bait. That could have been a hard-hitting, super effective Ice Beam. What a great call for P4TOM4N there.
A huge no shield for P4TOM4N. Could have been super effective damage, just the Sparkling Aria instead. And now, with this Rock Tomb debuff, I do not think that this Cradley is in Sparkling Aria range. You need to throw the Ice Beam.
If it doesn't work once, you go for it twice. Again, the Sparkling Area does P4TOM4N put up a Protect Shield. I believe Ilqm is one side away from another. And yes, we see the Protect Shield come up here. I believe the timer is up. We see the switch from Ilqm. And there's the catch on the Rock Tomb on the Dusclops.
Ilqm pulling out all the stops here. What a huge catch here. This will lock in an attack debuff for the next 50 seconds at least on this Dusclops. Here we go, though. We see the Shadow Scizor take the field. It's going to be a little bit bulkier knowing that these attacks have been debuffed by the Dusclops.
We've seen this matchup earlier, but as you said, the Shadow Punch will do less damage. That's why we see P4TOM4N bringing this Scizor, because now it can hang on a little bit better. Going for the Charge Tech priority type. Perfect counting from P4TOM4N here. Ilqm kind of in a tough spot. Do you use your final protection here? This Scizor is kind of tough to take out at this point.
What are you going to do? You're going to do resisted Fury Cutters. You're going to do resisted Psy Waves. One-turn attacks still do add up versus this Scizor, but you have an energy advantage as well, and you can get a guaranteed attack buff if you want to throw the Trailblaze. P4TOM4N, we've seen him prioritizing this Night Slash. 12.5% chance to get the double attack boost. Ilqm lets it go.
P4TOM4N is hoping that he can get to 2 Charge Sticks here. Remember that Ilqm has Ice Beam on the Lapras, so I think that's what he's back on. And there we see the catch on the Aqua Jet. Muy bien. What a play from P4TOM4N.
You're going to catch against me. You know what? I'm going to flip the script and catch against you. Now Mandibuzz looks like it's in a great spot. It is a great answer to this Golisopod, and it double resists the Psywaves from the Lapras, plus it has some energy.
I think that the most... Oh, we see another catch! These trainers are just dancing around. Even though both Aerial Ace and Foul Play are neutral, this is a less efficient charge set, keeping Ilqm's Lapras a little bit healthier, and it has already an Ice Beam going for another Sparkling Area. Is P4TOM4N going to call this as well? He puts up a protection on his final protection on this Mandibuzz.
He knows how important the Mandibuzz is. It's going to be the key to victory for him. Needs to preserve this HP, but needs to take out this Lapras as well. In comes the Aerial Ace. I don't think that Lapras will be able to hang on, and Ilqm uses his final Protect Shield as well.
The timer's up. Scizor comes in. It gets to the Night Slash. This is a crucial play. Going for an undercharge, though. P4TOM4N doesn't want to give the Golisopod any energy to allow the Golisopod to knock out the Mandibuzz. It doesn't go down just yet, and you get the Bullet Punch down.
Minimizes the amount of health and therefore energy this Golisopod is able to get. How close are we to the Aerial Ace? Ilqm is at the Aqua Jet. He throws it just before the Aerial Ace. Will this be enough to knock out?
This Aqua Jet is a very efficient charge attack. It comes from a high attack. Pokemon Mandibuzz is bulky. Get it angled. It angled! P4TOM4N ties up the score to 2-2.
P4TOM4N pulling off a miracle here yet again, down 2-0, winning game number 3, winning game number 4, and we are now going to go to a decisive game 5 here in the winners finals.
Just like the previous game, even though P4TOM4N had the momentum there, Ilqm doesn't give up just there, because there was again a win on just a sliver of HP here. Ilqm is putting in his best, so is P4TOM4N, and we're gonna go into the decisive game number 5 in that winners finals. The winner of this match goes into the grand final. The loser of this match will have to play against its Accent.
One of the most entertaining battles that we have seen throughout the entire tournament. We saw at least 3 catches, we saw combo plays, we saw charge attack priorities, we saw nail biters. I know everyone in the audience was holding their breath as Ilqm launched that final charge attack, but Mandibuzz, too bulky. We talked about the Dark Flyers, we talked about the Galarian Moltres versus the Mandibuzz. You know what Mandibuzz has? It has the bulk, and it hung on to that charge attack.
And this catch from P4TOM4N, he let the Cradily go, allowing a Scissor and Mandibuzz to clear out the game. What a tremendous insight that he had there. Also, you pointed out that previously P4TOM4N didn't bring the Marowak and Ilqm didn't bring the Dedenne. He did bring the Dedenne, and Ilqm this time didn't bring the Dedenne. P4TOM4N brought the Mandibuzz, and again, this time, Ilqm again brought the Golisopod and the Duskull score. Mandibuzz got aligned perfectly.
Well, you talked about how impactful that Mandibuzz could be if it was able to avoid that Dedenne, and I think maybe that's why P4TOM4N early on wanted to avoid it, thinking that Dedenne was likely. In fact, we saw 2 consecutive games from Ilqm using that Dedenne, but he lost with it in game number 3, which maybe thinks, okay, it didn't work out so hot for me here, I'm going to put it on the bench. That's a cue for P4TOM4N to bring the Mandibuzz, knowing that it should be free.
I think that this combination of Mandibuzz and Scissor just complements itself so well, just like the Dusclops and Golisopod core from Ilqm. Just because one of those Pokemon is more attack weighted, it can use those Protect Shields, and then the other Pokemon, Mandibuzz and Dusclops, they don't need those Protect Shields, so you can preserve them for your attack weighted Pokemon that output way more damage.
The one Pokemon that we haven't seen at all so far, I believe for Ilqm, is the Shadow Drapion. Is it just too risky to bring, knowing there's a Steel type, knowing there's a Shadow Kanto Marowak?
I think that the Scissor might exactly be the reason why we haven't seen the Shadow Drapion come out, but it does have a lot of neutral play across the board, and perhaps the Shadow Marowak might also be very threatening, as Shadow Drapion has only one weakness, which is ground, and Mud Slap just hits so incredibly hard. Even though you have coverage in Aqua Tail on Shadow Drapion, which paces extremely fast, it generally doesn't really want to see that Shadow Marowak.
I think in matchups where shields are down or you're able to just resist the fast attack pressure, Drapion shines because it's able to spam out those charge attacks and has relatively good coverage. But in situations where you're reliant on fast attack pressure, or that's the name of the game, it really starts to struggle. So knowing that there is a Shadow Kanto Marowak, there's a Shadow Scizor, even a Greninja, there's a lot of reasons for Ilqm to keep it on the bench.
The Shadow Drapion has been working very well for him yesterday, though, so perhaps it is time to bring out that trump card in the Shadow Drapion. It is a very strong Pokemon all throughout the entire meta. I think P4TOM4N is ready. Ilqm needs a few more moments to think it through.
Yeah, these trainers are still locking in, and just keep in mind the moment for these trainers. One game determines whether they have to fight another battle in losers finals, or if they make it to the grand finals.
Here we go, decisive game number 5. Don P4TOM4N on the left, King Ilqm on the right. It's the Azumarill again into the Dusclops.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is a replay of game number 1. We saw the Golisopod in the back getting lined up versus the Cradily. P4TOM4N has enjoyed bringing in this Cradily to draw out that Golisopod.
But I don't know if he needs to this time, because he has the Shadow Scissor in the back instead of that Shadow Marowak. A Play Rough is coming through here, which will deal a seizable amount of damage to this Dusclops, but it will hang on. You'd need another Play Rough as the Azumarill, and Dusclops will need a few more Shadow Punches here. It already has 2 loaded, though.
With these 3-turn mirror attacks, with Hex and with Bubble, you are giving so many additional bubbles to this Azumarill every time you throw one of those Shadow Punches. Ilqm trying to stay ahead on energy, though, knowing that there may be a swap in at some point. He doesn't want to be caught energy free or energy dry.
I would not be surprised if we see a catch attempt here from Ilqm on the Lapras. No, we see the Greatly come in immediately from P4TOM4N. Again, an aggressive play, but this is only a Shadow Punch. This is not an Ice Punch. Does P4TOM4N know? He knows!
Yeah, it's a little surprising not seeing the super effective move being thrown. Now, the Golisopod hits the field, though. Perhaps that you need a little bit of that chip damage to put this Pokemon into X-Scissor range. He is once again able to still outpace. Gets to the X-Scissor right as the Rock Tomb was loaded as well.
This is looking very good for Ilqm. No protection being used. That knocks out the Greatly. That's not what P4TOM4N was expecting. The Azumarill was way too low health to consistently deal with this, but looks like P4TOM4N is putting it all on his Shadow Scissor.
I think he thought he was going to hang on, and Ilqm actually a little bit ahead in energy as well, as with a slight overfarm after that X-Scissor, he's now able to outpace the Shadow Scissor to energy.
I think there's only one thing that can save P4TOM4N here, and that is a nice slash boost. He's been going for nice slash over and over. Does he do it again here? Oh, we see Ilqm go for the Aqua Jet here, stripping away the final shield from P4TOM4N.
How much energy does this Azumarill still have, and will that energy even be impactful?
Well, the thing is, if you swap in the Azumarill, it leaves... Oh! We see it again from Ilqm! He does it again!
Ilqm able to make an incredible catch on his Dusclops, leading to an undercharge by P4TOM4N. Wants to get a couple additional bullet punches. Look at this Hex damage adding up. 2 more bullet punches from P4TOM4N, though, able to get a little bit of that energy back, but there is still a full Lapras to get through, and 2 Protect Shields.
Shadow Scissor waving at the avatar from Ilqm there. What do you bring in now? It is the Scissor. It has no energy. It does have 2 Protect Shields here. Night Slash is coming in. Remember, a 12% chance to double boost the attack here. In that case, you could get a bullet punch down here as Golisopod is attempting to get to another charge deck. It is 1 Fury Cutter away. Do we see the catch attempt from P4TOM4N here?
You have to make a catch if you're P4TOM4N. It's all on the back of this Scissor at this point. You have no Protect Shields remaining. Aqua Jet gets locked in, and this is going to knock out the Scissor. Unstoppable. Ilqm is doing it again.
Ilqm is about to defend the North America region. Azumarill has energy, but there's the Lapras, and Lapras is bulky. It's going to hang on to these play roughs. Looks like both trainers are discussed, but for now it's looking like Ilqm is going to take this game number 5.
No need for the Skull Bash. One more Sparkling Aria locks it in, and this is going to knock out the Azumarill. But Martine, you mentioned it. These trainers seem to be having some dialogue here with the judges. They want to make sure that that game number 5 will stand.
I believe we may have seen a slight deficit on that Scissor there. That could have been crucial, and because of that, P4TOM4N perhaps lost track of the energy there. Again, keeping track of the energy is so important in Pokemon Go, because if you can maximize your energy, perhaps you could make that catch, and the Scissor could potentially land the Trailblaze. But the thing is, Lapras is so bulky. I don't think a single Trailblaze would knock out there.
No, I don't think so either. It's just any super effect. I don't know that any super effective damage can one-hit knock out a Lapras. So you're in such a tough situation. Now the judges need to be thinking, okay, what was the, not only what happened, but what was the impact of that moment? Was there a one-turn deficit that we saw in that? How did that impact P4TOM4N's plays? Even if there was not that one-turn deficit, would that still have been an Ilqm match win? Remember, as it stands right now, Ilqm did on paper win that game number 5. That would catapult him to the grand finals, moving P4TOM4N down to the losers finals where he would face off versus It's Axon. But you can see these trainers still having discussions with our judges.
It's Axon actually has almost the same team as Ilqm, so this is kind of a warmer for P4TOM4N if it would get to that. However, It's Axon has the Araquanid instead of the Golisopod. A water and bug type Pokemon, the same typing as well. However, it's much bulkier, and we saw yesterday that bug bite damage almost seems not resisted by the Scissor. It deals so much damage now. It is the same kind of attack as Dragon Breath is.
Yeah, Bug Breath we can call it sometimes. Well, Inadequence, I wanted to ask you, let's say that P4TOM4N does move down to the losers finals. Does It's Axon have an edge against P4TOM4N, knowing that he's been able to see so many of Ilum's plays with his team so reminiscent of his own?
I think that It's Axon might be thinking and learning from how P4TOM4N is playing, but P4TOM4N also knows this. He's no stranger to the scene, has played into many of these kind of top trainers. Even though it is out of region, P4TOM4N has played at both the 2023 and 2024 World Championships, so he does have that experience with international competition, and I do think that P4TOM4N won't be really distracted by it and has to come up with new strategies though. Perhaps he just brings the same strategy and It's Axon's like, well, there's no way he's going to do that, and then you still bring the Shadow Marowak.
Well, you mentioned this earlier, Inadequence, but P4TOM4N's been playing a bit more offensive. Some very early switches that we've been seeing, trying to force Ilqm to be on the back foot. Like you said, though, Ilqm being a bit more defensive. How would you describe It's Axon and his team? More like P4TOM4N or more like Ilqm?
I think it's definitely more like Ilqm in terms of Pokemon, but the way its Ilqm plays is also pretty similar. Sometimes switch advantage can be so much more important, and what Ilqm has been doing here that's really been holding P4TOM4N down is keep over farming with the energy on his Pokemon. We see him keep more energy close to a Shadow Punch on the Dusclops, and it makes it difficult for P4TOM4N to bring in the Scissor. He wants to have a clean energy head start with that Scissor, and Ilqm doesn't give him that, because every time Scissor comes in, he's gonna get punched immediately by the Dusclops.
What we keep seeing, speaking of energy advantages, is when P4TOM4N is switching in his Cradily, Ilqm is normally throwing a charged attack from his Dusclops. We saw Shadow Punch last time, but with that pacing from his Golisopod, he's still able to reach that charge attack ahead of P4TOM4N's own Cradily.
Correct. And even though you have that Ice Punch coverage, it's really sometimes not needed as long as that Mandibuzz or the Cradily is not there. Cradily has been a crucial component there for P4TOM4N. Rock Tomb is one of the best charge attacks in the game. If you have a Pokemon with Rock Tomb, it's probably pretty good.
Absolutely. Rock Tomb has been one of the more efficient charged attacks in general, but let's not discount its utility as well, with access to that one-stage attack debuff guaranteed against your opponent.
In the video game, I know it drops the speed stat of the opposing Pokemon. Like I said earlier, speed is a little bit combined with attack here, so there are some similarities there, except that Rock Tomb is very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the Pokemon for Ilqm that I've been most impressed by is the Lapras. I know we didn't see it necessarily featured there in game number 3, but what Lapras is so great at doing is that when you face an opponent that does not have a lot of HP left, they maybe have a lot of energy, just like we saw there, it is able to easily tank charge attacks from Pokemon, and with one turn sideways, you're guaranteeing that you're doing at least 1 damage per turn. So in situations where you have something like a Scizor that doesn't have a huge HP stat in general, you're still going to be doing damage even though it's resisted sideways.
Correct, but still, when you have the opportunity to even resist something, I think that is where Scissor usually shines, even though that is resisted Psywave, still adding up every half second, as Psywave is a one-turn fast attack, and one turn in Pokemon Go is half a second. They still add up quite strong on the Scissor. Imagine that you have a timer of 200 versus a timer of 100, and the fast attack does 1 damage every time. Which Pokemon goes down earlier?
Obviously the one that's going to be doing 200 damage, yes?
It is the Pokemon that has 100 HP that will go down quicker.
Yes, because it has fewer total HP in Adamance.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. Well, speaking of Psywave, I know it's a very good attack on Lapras, a relatively defense and HP weighted Pokemon, but a clone of Psywave now is what?
Fury Cutter.
Fury Cutter on that Golisopod.
And that is a strong addition here. Now, it used to have Shadow Claw. Shadow Claw, a Ghost-type fast attack, actually would have been pretty good in this meta. Yesterday and today on the team of Ilqm, we see so many Dusclops, and Shadow Claw Golisopod actually fares much better there, since then 2 charge attacks paired with it would knock out. And now Fury Cutter resisted, even though it is better on Golisopod, that actually won't knock out a Dusclops.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, no Dusclops on the side of P4TOM4N for Ilqm to have to face, so he's certainly benefiting from that Fury Cutter. It's going to be hitting super effective into several of those Pokemon, including the Cradily as well as the Greninja. We haven't seen that Greninja. That's been the one left on the bench, and for Ilqm, he's been keeping that Drapion on the bench.
And what do you learn from? Technically, that was the 6th game, as the first battle also had a similar situation here. So these trainers have been battling over and over now. How do you deal with so many of these matches? I think it definitely comes down to, again, do you bring the Mandibuzz? And for Ilqm, do you bring that Dedenne?
Well, I think we have to talk about the mental here for a second in Adequance. You have to not let your emotions get the best of you. Obviously, there can be some frustrations from the perspective of Ilqm. Hey, I felt like I just won that game, and now I might have a replay. On the same side for P4TOM4N, feeling like, hey, I should have been able to have some additional turns than I was able to have. I'm frustrated here. So you really have to make sure that you remain calm and collected here. And it looks like these trainers are taking off their headsets. This is going to be a match win going to Ilqm. Ilqm will be moving on to the Grand Finals.
It looks like that turn deficit wasn't decisive enough for that game. Ilqm is still undefeated